Hey there, internet friends. Trevor Starkey here, and welcome to another episode of That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering, discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions of the thing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome. And of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, ring the notification bell on YouTube, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have nobody. It is another solo episode here of That D Plus Show. And for this week's episode, I'm diving into Star Wars Biomes. Now, why did I pick this? So I picked this because the week was just kind of busy, and I wasn't able to really coordinate with anybody else to bring on another guest. So, but thank you again to Tucker and Myron for joining us last week to talk about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So, with kind of the idea of like, hey, it's going to probably be a solo episode, I was like, let me dive into something, relatively brief that I can manage in part because I basically want to wrap this up pretty quick as well, so I can hop into Mass Effect Legacy Edition now that is coming out here in like an hour from when I'm recording this. So it was like kind of all those things kind of combined, and so yeah, I kind of coupled that with, hey, I had heard about this thing. When I was on the Castle Vault podcast last week, Jason mentioned Star Wars Biomes, and he basically described it as it's like the soaring over California or soaring, over the world ride from California Adventure, but with Star Wars stuff. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And I looked at it, and it was like, it's an 18-minute thing. Let me hop into it and kind of check it out. And yeah, so it's one of the handful of things that came to D Plus on Star Wars Day. The way it is described, like the description for the piece is, quote, take a virtual vacation to take a virtual vacation to some of the Star Wars film's most iconic and beloved locations like Hoth, Tatooine, and Sorgan, as this charming series whisks you off for fly-through tours of the galaxy far, far away. So a couple things there. One, Sorgan, I was like, I don't know what Sorgan is. Sorgan is apparently the swamp planet from The Mandalorian, which is featured somewhat heavily in this. And then the other thing there is this charming series. So maybe they're going to make more of these, but right now it's only the one thing. So yeah, let's talk about it a little bit. A little bit of the history lesson here. Originally released May the 4th, 2021. Other releases of the time. The other three things I think that basically came to Disney Plus on May the 4th this year were, of course, the big kind of showcase piece was Star Wars The Bad Batch, the first episode, Aftermath. But then you also had a new short from The Simpsons called Maggie Simpson in The Force Awakens from its nap, which is a cute little thing where Maggie's basically goes to a new daycare. It even kind of pokes fun at the Ayn Rand daycare, which I believe was like the first Simpsons theatrical short that they did years and years ago, because you see them driving by, but instead they go to a Star Wars themed daycare. It's basically just her in a daycare with a whole bunch of Star Wars references. She faces off against another baby that's basically like a Darth Maul, has a double-bladed lightsaber. She turns her pacifier into a lightsaber. She has like a run-in with BB-8. General Grievous is in there, I think Chewbacca was like a teacher or something like that. So just lots of little, like, it's like a 3-4 minute video or something like that. Lots of little Star Wars nods and references in there. It was a cute little thing. And then the other notable release, not notable release, but the other release that kind of falls under this Biomes category is Star Wars Vehicle Fly-Throughs, where it's basically like a few minutes going through, Millennium Falcon and stuff like that. Just kind of like, let's, do a tour of the vehicles of Star Wars. So yeah. As I said, the runtime of this, 18 minutes for a single episode. It basically goes over 6 planets that you kind of dive into. Where does this fall in the Star Wars timeline of things? Sort of outside of the Star Wars timeline, but also maybe during some key moments, which we will talk about here in a second. The roll call. Who's who in this film? I think this is maybe the first time I've ever had this where I can't really give you a roll call because there's not a director listed. There's not any writers, of course, to it, and it doesn't star anybody. There's like nobody in this. It is purely a. It is almost as if. So the original kind of description of like, hey, it's like soaring, USA or soaring over the world or something like that, or soaring California. It's kind of like that, but like a very slow version of that. Like I would never see this turned into a version of the Soarin' ride because it's just too slow, and there's not like action to it. It's very much like, hey, we're gonna do kind of a steady flyover shot. A lifetime ago, I worked at a Sam's Club, and I remember at the time the DVD for the Planet Earth series was like hot stuff. It was like, hey, like buy this. It might even be the Blu-ray. I don't know. But it was basically like we had that as like the showcase thing showing off how good all of the TVs looked. And it was basically, nature documentary kind of thing. This felt more like that, but for Star Wars, because it is just like, imagine you're in a helicopter and you're flying over Hoth. I mean, the Hoth one in particular is the opening piece of the thing, and it basically let me see. Kind of, I took the notes of kind of like, yeah, you're flying over Hoth. It's clearly a big snow planet. Some snow speeders fly in. A probe droid crashes to the ground. You get like a pack of tauntauns kind of like walking over a ridge. And then as you continue to like fly and you can see over the ridge now, you can start seeing AT-ATs walking across the snow, heading towards presumably the rebel base in Hoth. You see a transport ship like flying towards the camera basically. So it's like, is this happening during the Battle of Hoth or like right before the Battle of Hoth? Like clearly there's not like a fight going on. There's not a dog fight going on. So it's not just like a far removed view of the Battle of Hoth that we see. It's just kind of like, let's take all of the elements we know from Hoth and like let's create a new image of that. So yeah, there's that. It's a weird little piece. This is another one. There's obviously no trivia on this thing in IMDb, but I did pull together just based on kind of watching it. I pulled together some trivia, or the trivia I pulled together is like the Hoth elements, as I kind of just touched on, seem to imply that it takes place in the lead up to the Battle of Hoth, as we see a probe droid land and we see the AT-ATs approaching and we see a transport departing, but it's not like we're not seeing snow speeders engaging on the AT-ATs and like tying them up in tow cables. It's just like, the minutes before the Battle of Hoth, before the action starts going crazy. Maybe, I don't know. Other trivia that I pulled together: the Tatooine section appears to be, timeline wise, early in A New Hope because we see R2D2 and C3PO roaming the desert. The swamp/farming planet from The Mandalorian is, as I alluded to above, called Sorgan. Did not know that, had not picked that up from the season 1 of The Mandalorian. And we see the Razor Crest landing, so spoilers for The Mandalorian, but that means it happens probably somewhere in the season 1 timeline of the show. Because obviously those that watch the show know that the Razor Crest gets pretty handily destroyed in season 2. And so theoretically it's either, when he's first arriving there in episode 4, was it? When he meets Cara Dune and he saves the village from the Scout Walker, the ATST. Or it's like when he's returning later on in the season to go recruit Cara Dune for his mission at the end of the season. I don't know. All like it probably exists kind of outside of time, but based on what we see there, those like, hey, maybe if you wanted to put this in events. There you go. We get a flyover of Crate, which and basically that appears to be happening during the battle at the end of The Last Jedi, because we see ski speeders kind of like gliding across and disrupting the salt, and kind of lifting up the red sand below, as well as we see the walkers basically walking in. We see kind of the one of my favorite images probably of this was kind of the cool image of like the footprints. The basically it's we you know the movie made a great deal of like how cool it looks with the ski speeders flying across the sand, and raising up the salt and seeing like the red underneath. And this does a good job of showing like what it looked like from the other side with the walkers, the first order walkers kind of going across the sand, and seeing like their footprints in red basically underneath now. And then lastly, there's one that basically Mustafar is in here, but there's nothing really to identify like when this happens. And then so the last one is Octo, which is another one. I didn't know the name of this planet, but this is the planet that Luke Skywalker is on in The Last Jedi, where Rey goes and finds him and does her training and stuff. And we see like one of the last things we see in this 18-minute short is the Millennium Falcon lifting off and flying away. So theoretically, that would be when Rey is going off to face off against Kylo Ren. So yeah, that was those are the little bits of trivia. It's like, hey, based on what we see in each of these biomes, here's maybe where it exists in the timeline of Star Wars. As far as like what did we think and how does it hold up, it's a very weird kind of thing. I watched it with the intent of just kind of sitting down and talking to the camera like I am, but I did put the feeler out to the team last night, basically saying like, hey, I watched this thing. It's 18 minutes. If any of you like have time to watch it and want to sit down and discuss it, it's just a fascinating kind of use of the Star Wars brand to put out there. Because it is like, it's not exciting or anything. It's just a very chill kind of thing. And like they do a cool job. I happen to be watching it with like my headphones on and stuff. So they do a great thing with like 3D audio, and like when a snowspeeder flies by, it's flying by, that side of your head and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just like, it's so slow. Like when the first one we see, the first two we get are Hoth and Tatooine, which arguably have like the most little references and little nods to the series in them, and the most recognizable of the planets. But then we get to something like Sorgan, the Mandalorian planet. It's like, you can tell it's the Mandalorian planet because it's basically got like, it's just a very far away shot with like the village, and then like the weird little like irrigation ponds that village had for the farming. But it just is like a very slow fade in of that village over like 3 minutes. And really the only thing that happened was like the Razor Crest flying in and landing out in the forest. And then apart from that, like, you don't see creatures. You hear creatures like clicking and stuff. Like you hear creature noises, but like you don't see anything else. So it's just a very slow pan in of this like CGI village for a good 2 or 3 minutes. And so it's like, that's not interesting to watch. So it's a very like, it reminds me almost of like, hey, this is, I guess, the kind of thing you would throw on if you don't want to throw on like The Christmas Log on Netflix or something like that for Christmas Day, like the fireplace thing, where it's just like, hey, here's an 8-hour video of a fireplace burning or whatever. Like, it's that kind of thing. It's just a very low key, trip. I mean, vacation as they kind of describe it in across Star Wars biomes. So yeah, it's just a very weird use of the license. Like, if it had been something that was like more action heavy and you're flying over these biomes and like, the camera's tilting and stuff like that, I could very much see them turning this into a Star Wars version of Soarin' California or Soarin' Over the World. that they could absolutely pull at California Adventure, or something like a Star Tours kind of ride, a motion simulator kind of ride. But this is not that. This is just, hey, we're gonna do slow pans and throw in a handful of like Star Warsy references. Like the Sorgan one is the weirdest of the bunch because it is just like we see the Razor. I mean, Sorgan and Mustafar, because Mustafar it's just like, okay, this is a lava planet, and there's like a big, towery kind of thing, which is presumably like Vader's castle or whatever that he's on during like Rogue One and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, like, and there's like, I think we see like a few TIE fighters fly through that one, but other than that, it's just flying over this weird lava planet, and like no other action is happening. So it's just a bizarre use of the Star Wars license. I'm fascinated by it, and also just questioning like why is this a thing that exists? Why is this a thing that they put so much like time and resources into, like doing these CGI shots for this 18-minute video, I guess. Yeah, it's just a weird thing. But I will say, like, in terms of favorite moments slash scenes, really the so it goes through Hoth, it goes through Tatooine, then Sorgan from The Mandalorian, and then Crate is really probably the coolest one for me, just because it breaks up everything we've seen before. Everything else has been like, a somewhat isometric view of a location or something, and just kind of like fades or like slowly kind of pans across the landscape or something. For the Crate one, it's shot like a top down. It's shot like you are, a drone flying over the battle kind of thing. And so you it starts out and you just kind of see the a few lines of red across the salty desert cracks or something like that. And then you start hearing like the noises of the battle, and you start hearing like blaster fire and stuff. And you see like it could even be like the skeeter, the speeder that Rose is in, and like crashes into, or that like Finn and Rose kind of crashed into each other to keep from like the suicide moment or whatever, because there's like a wreckage of a speeder, and clearly a collision happened, and then you see one like riding by, and then you see like TIE fighters kind of coming the other direction. You see the walkers kind of like come in. And the whole thing, because it's shot top down and you're just kind of like moving across the landscape towards the walkers basically, and then past the walkers to see, as I said, the like footprints that they left behind. Like it's the most visually interesting of the biomes, because everything else is just kind of like, yeah, it's a slow pan in, and you're too far away from any kind of action for any of it to really matter too much. The other, I guess, cool, like kind of pseudo cool thing is like in Tatooine, you do get to a point where like you're traveling along and you pass by, again, a lot of like Tatooine level, Easter eggs, like the C-3PO and R2-D2, sand people on Banthas, Tusken Raiders on Banthas. You see dewbacks, you see a crate dragon kind of skeleton, and then you see like a land speeder, and you kind of follow the land speeder for a while. And that's like a cool one where that's like, when I saw that, I was like, okay, this could be like a Soarin' over adventure kind of thing, if they basically played this at like double speed or triple speed even. But they don't. It eventually just kind of like departs, and you get this like classic shot of like the twin suns on Tatooine and stuff. But yeah, so the Crate one stands out because of just how differently shot it is from everything else. Then you get into Mustafar, as I said, that's like a low point because it's just like the lava and the lava waterfall and a couple of TIE fighters flying by. It's like, and the, as I wrote in my notes, the spooky Sauron tower, because that's kind of what Vader's tower looks like. Oh, you also get an Imperial shuttle flying in there on that one. So yeah, there is like one more thing happens on that one than happens on the Mandalorian one. And then Octo, like you kind of fly in, and it's very clearly like the islands from Last Jedi or the end of Force Awakens, and then freaking porgs are there, and you basically like fly in behind some porgs, and then the porgs basically like speed up and outpace you toward the island and stuff. There's like a cool sea creature that like kind of half surfaces throughout, basically like a giant sea lizard or sea dragon or something like that, and you see like the tail surface a couple times. You never see like the full breadth of the creature. But that was a cool little thing of like, oh, that adds a little bit of lore, a little bit more lore to this planet. And then yeah, like the final real like action thing is the Millennium Falcon like revving up and leaving and flying away. And it's like, okay. And then you just continue to fly over the island for another like 3 minutes or something like that. It's just like, yeah, this is just a weird thing. But so yeah, in terms of like favorite moments, the crate sequence is I think the coolest of this bit. And then everything else is just like, it's interesting, but not nearly interesting enough for the amount of time we spend in each of these places or the way it's done. So yeah, it's a very overall, again, a very weird use of the Star Wars license. Go check it out and kind of let me know what you think, I guess. Overall, in terms of like a grade, I gotta give it like, I guess I give it like a C. Like it's there. It's not bad, but it's not good or great either. It's just kind of there. It's just a very weird thing to exist in 2021 here. So yeah, extra credit. The other suggestions that you'll get if you go to the Star Wars biomes, you'll get the Star Wars vehicle fly-throughs that I mentioned. You'll get Disney Gallery Star Wars: The Mandalorian, which if you have watched that or have not watched it, we did 3 episodes of that D Plus show on that series, kind of breaking it out, into 3 parts, so you can check that out. Of course, The Mandalorian is on there itself. Empire of Dreams, the story of the Star Wars trilogy, is basically the Star Wars documentary looking at the original trilogy of Star Wars things. It's one of those that Logan Cameron and I have talked about a couple times of like, that'd be a really cool thing to do as that D Plus show. So maybe we'll finally get together and coordinate that. And then the other suggestions, the last suggestions are rounded out by Star Wars Episode 4, 5, 6, and 7, i.e. A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and The Force Awakens, respectively. Other extracurriculars, other things I'm watching on Disney Plus. I've been kind of continuing to chip away at the 3rd and final season of the DuckTales reboot. Really enjoying that. That's a great series. I love kind of checking that out. And then I'm continuing to pick away at the Mighty Ducks Game Changers, enjoying each of those new episodes as they come out. And the day this episode goes live, I believe, is the kickoff of High School Musical: The Musical, the series, season 2. So I'm definitely going to check that out when I can, probably later tonight. So yeah, enjoying some Disney Plus stuff. It's a good time. Like I said, I also watched the Maggie Simpson short of The Force Awakens from its nap. And I'm also continuing to watch the Bad Batch episodes, the new Bad Batch episodes as they come out. So yeah, that's what else I'm watching on that D Plus show. Like I said, check out Star Wars Biomes, like throw it on. Let me know what you think about it, because it's a weird thing, especially if you're a Star Wars fan. I'm curious of like, hey, is this cool or is this not? Like, what do you think of Star Wars Biomes? Let me know in the comments below or tweet at me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter. But that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you for joining me. You can follow me, as I said, at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter. And I also will give a shout out to this week. We wrapped up on our YouTube channel a couple of our longer Let's Play series that we've done so far. Logan and I finished our It Takes Two playthrough, which was all in all an 8-part series that you can go find. We have a dedicated playlist to it on the site. And then Cameron wrapped up his 5-part series on Emily is Away 3. So you can go basically. It was a week of series finales on that D Plus or on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/thatnerdysite this week. So check out all that stuff. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always help support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.